What if our youth can grow up conscious and resilient? What tools would allow our children to be thriving and joyful? Welcome to the Growing Up Conscious Show with Kathleen Connor. Hello, and welcome back to Growing Up Conscious. I'm your host, Kathleen Connor. And after raising two sons and teaching for more than 25 years as a special educator, while also training in consciousness and energetic bodywork, I created this podcast for people ages 2 to 202 who are engaged in creating a conscious, aware, joyful life and living. So since I mentor families and speak about youth empowerment and resilience, one of my targets for the show is that youth and adults, of course, have the tools at a younger age to consciously create the life they desire. So today I'm interviewing the lovely Monica Gilliam. Hello, Monica.
Hello.
I was especially interested in interviewing Monica after I heard her speak on a topic that interests me. I have been doing a class on and off with this woman named Anelia Benz, who, the topic of the class was experiential telepathy, right? But she says to start with plants and animals, especially like to start with plants and then animals that you already know, like maybe a pet or something, right? And then she gave some ideas about that, right? So I've been practicing various different things in terms of like consciously communicating and thinking about how there's the word communicate and then there's the word communing with, right? Because as like a lot of people do, they talk about if you want to communicate with something, do your best to commune with that. So whether it's like plants like I have over here, or animals like the horse over here, or even the person in front of you, part of it is communing with them as well so that you're aware of them. So I was just curious in regards to those two words and how you think they're related when it comes to communicating with everything around you.
Well, the funny thing is that there is a similar root, but what I find is that when people think about communicating, they have a sense of language that's kind of tied into there, which can be a little tricky because sometimes
Yes.
what you're trying to communicate with may not speak your language, like a dog or a plant, and then with communion, there's so much kind of confusion about what that even is, you know.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so both of those words, they have a root that seems like it confuses us.
Yes, I agree. Because so much, and even though they have studies saying that for people, more it's more important what the nonverbal part of the communication is than the words, which makes sense, right? But we don't really usually learn as kids to follow the energy of things and pay attention to what actually is going on beyond the words, right?
There's a lot of paying attention to what's going on beyond the words that is, from my point of view, uh, paying attention to yourself in a way or to your own awareness, and that there are all of these kind of, you know, I'm not sure, like symptoms of your awareness or these ways that it shows up for you that it's very hard to have somebody else explain to you. Like, for example, I get a lot of information from my body, but what does that mean? For the longest time, I thought that the information that I was getting from my body meant that it had to do with me. But if I smell something, it's not necessarily that I smell like that thing that I'm smelling. So there are ways that my body will give me information about the world around me, and then sometimes I can kind of misinterpret that, you know.
Yes.
So there's in as you're, growing up, discovering how to move with and through the world, there's a certain amount of kind of starting to get a sense of how it is that you're being aware. What are all of the little clues that you're getting from the world around you, and beginning to trust in your own awareness as you begin to try to engage with everything else.
Yes, that's so perfect. And you're psychic already, because I was going to talk about communication with your body as well as one of my questions, but it brings up when I was young, elementary school, um, I started limping around and my mom could not figure out why. And she did x-rays. They couldn't find out any physical reason. And I was limping around for a while and acting like I couldn't walk. When I talked to her about it again as an adult, she said, I think it was because you were really sympathetic for another boy in your class, that you were picking up that that would be helpful to him or something, or that you wanted to do something for him. And as a child, no, nobody taught me, like, who does this belong to, right? So you think something's going on in your body, and it might not even be something that's going on in your body, right? So
Right.
when it comes to communicating with plants and animals, I've noticed, especially from working with a lot of children with what we would call autism, right? That that whole idea that pictures, and sending a picture to my head to their head, or like picturing what I would like to communicate, sometimes gets across better. And I've been thinking about that with plants and animals as well. So what is your sense of all of that?
Well, there's a few things. So just to kind of go back to the body stuff, one kind of example that I like to give is like, say you're talking to somebody who has really bad breath. Like, no matter how much you brush your own teeth, that's not actually going to address the situation. But if you can just be like, oh, I'm smelling something, and then you just start to kind of ask a bunch of questions, in the asking the questions, you can get some more information. And then when you get the information that's like, yeah, that it has this kind of like, for me at least, this relaxation, or like my attention can kind of come off of it, so in that example, okay, so I'm smelling this crazy thing. Is it me? Oh no. Okay, where is it coming from? Oh, it's this person. Oh, it's every time they talk. Oh, what can I do about it? I can step back. I can offer them some gum. I can just be okay with it and just relax, So it's like playing around with, as you're getting information, whatever it is, whether it's from a person or from a plant, that kind of asking more questions and more questions can kind of lead you to getting more information about it. And so, like, another example that I have is years ago, when I first was introduced to these ideas of like the consciousness of the earth, or the consciousness of plants. And it kind of had this like fairy tale aspect to it that was like, oh, that's fun, that's cool. I would love for fairy tales to be real. And then shortly after kind of being introduced to this idea of the consciousness of the earth, I was asked to go out and cut back a whole bunch of ivy. And I was like, oh no, I mean, if it's conscious, does it hurt? Is it okay? I mean, I don't know what that's like. And so then I just went out and I just kind of was like, all right, even though I don't have a clear kind of reference point for what all of this is, I'm just going to say, everything that's conscious out here, can you please assist me to do this job that I've been given in a way that will actually create more? Please, if I'm about to cut through something I shouldn't, let me know. If there's something that would like to be cut, who knows? Let me know. And so then I just kind of asked that question and I just got to work. And then every once in a while, my hands would just stop. And I knew that because I had asked that question, that that was something for me to not try and force through, you know? So I would say, okay, my hands have stopped. And then I'd pause and kind of dig around and see, okay, what was I about to cut through? And there were so many times that like I was about to cut through the watering system and I was about to cut through a little tree. And, then for me in that moment, it was just so exciting. It was like I asked a question and I got information. And the way that that information showed up in that moment was with my body. There may have been all sorts of other information that I was receiving that I just didn't listen to or know how to interact with. But in that moment, it was just so exciting that I just started to go out and just ask everything, a billion questions, and then just relax. I think sometimes when you're trying to talk to something that doesn't speak a language that you're familiar with, it can be, we can get impatient. We can get frustrated with ourselves. I'm not understanding, or, all of that. So just like kind of giving yourself the space to begin the conversation. Like that's a huge step to go out and say, hey, plants, hi, uh, can you show me what to cut or not cut? That's beginning the conversation. And even if I hadn't gotten any sort of information, the willingness to do it kind of allowed me to open up to the response that I was getting. So it's like allowing yourself to begin to talk to everything around you. It may take you on a journey that nobody else has ever been on because nobody is you. So the ways that other people will be aware of the conversation may be not relevant for you, you
Yes.
know?
Well, and
And
just trusting yourself too, because once I started like consciously communicating with the plants in my house, let's say, and also some trees that are right outside my house that I like to communicate with, it's like then I started noticing some things like you're describing, but then you have to be willing to trust it instead of going like, am I crazy? Because it's not how most of us were programmed, right? So one example is there's a big plant I had always kept inside, and I talked to it because it was good. Now it's all over at my neighbors, but I'm getting ready to move, so I had to give my plants away. So I said to the plant, you're going to be going over to my neighbors. She'll take good care of you. And I got this hit from it all of a sudden that it wanted to be out on the porch, like directly in the wind and the rain and everything for a while because it wanted that kind of that whatever the because is. It's just that's what the communication I got. And you would think, based on the way we're taught in this reality, that it's like that's crazy. But I'm like, I'm just going to go with it. That's what I got the sense from the plant that it wants to be outside. I'm just going to give it a chance to go be outside. But you have to get beyond, what people tell you is normal in this reality, right?
well, it's so funny because so some years ago, I went to graduate school to study Chinese medicine. And we were learning all sorts of techniques to kind of listen to the body. So, like, you look at the tongue, you feel the pulse, and you're looking at the person to see, what color is their face? Do they look a little gray? So you're asking yourself to pick up on all of these cues from the person who's right in front of you. And we also learned a lot of osteopathic techniques where you put your hand on the body and maybe you start to feel where there's like tension in the soft tissue. And some of the techniques that we did were feeling for heat around the body. And my classmates would constantly go into, wait, am I making that up? Is that real?
Yeah.
And my point of view was like, that's quite specific. Like, why would you make up that it's going to the left? like out of everything, like what if that little hunch, what if that doesn't even have to be right, but it's something that you can begin to follow. So you say, oh, okay, it kind of seems like, this, shoulder is pulling up and to the right. And so then you just kind of go and explore, and then you push it down, and then you move it around. And then as you engage with it, you get even more information. But you won't start to get that more information if you shut it down immediately. So it's kind of like, so if you had the sense that your plant wanted to be outside and you took it outside and it was just a horrible situation, well, that adds to like, oh, maybe that wasn't exactly what the plant was saying, which leads to you having more kind of sensitivity in the future. We're like, oh, wow, this seems like when I thought the plant was saying this, but actually I could have asked some more questions. Like maybe the plant just wanted to go closer to the outside, and then you add that. So it is this kind of experimentation that if you're willing to just go on the adventure, you start to gather more tools and you start to become more able to trust yourself. It's like people talk about, if you're studying some sort of like physical therapy that, or, anything, music and stuff like that, that you want to get like 1,000 hours or whatever it is of practice. And that from just engaging with it, you get so much information that you don't have to try and understand. It's just the constant engagement that starts to open up your sensitivity.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, in regards to you being aware of, let's say, plants, you became aware you could communicate with them, and then essentially you just started playing with it and asking questions. Yeah.
Yeah. And asking questions really from this sense of like curiosity. I didn't have a whole bunch of, examples of people telling me what I should expect. If you go out and like there was one time that there was a plant that was covered in insects, and I went out and I was just like, hey, insects, how are you? What are you doing? And plant, and definitely there was a moment where I was like, man, if somebody could see me, they would be like, this crazy lady, she's trying to talk to bugs. But it was like, what's it gonna hurt? It's not hurting anybody for me to
Yeah.
sit here. And and I really didn't have an expectation that they would even talk to me, but I just was like, well, let's just try this out. And then I just had this sense that something kind of in a certain way said hello back to me. And then I said, hey, I'm not really sure what you guys are doing. I get the sense that you're doing something. But would you mind going to this other plant so that I can enjoy this one? And then the next day, they all moved.
Wow.
And I didn't have to spray anything. I just asked. And I was like completely surprised, and it had that sense of like, well, I sure didn't expect that, you know? And again, like I said, I didn't even know what would happen if I talked to the insects, but I just was curious, and that curiosity allowed me to go and ask a question with a sense of openness to like, I wonder what I will discover here, rather than is it going to be A, B, or C?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I'm always curious when I see, I forget what her name is, but this woman on Instagram who people call her to move beehives, you know. I don't know if you've seen it, where she goes over and there's just like a whole swarm of bees in the wall, and she just like calmly takes them out and finds the queen and gets them all to move. And it's just like she must be in communication with them in some way, because we have so many points of view about bees, right? And what would happen. And she's just like, oh no, we just move the bees now, you know?
Yeah, and well, and the funny thing, what I find, the more that I kind of play with this, is that you might be surprised at how much will respond to you if you just say hello. And then like getting past all of, it's strange, but like all of the almost like embarrassment about saying hello to something, or say, I'm just going to say hello to this tree. I'm just going to go ahead and say hello to this car or to this house or to my bank account. It really is like there's you're not going to create a problem by saying hello. And what if you could have fun and have a little adventure if you say hello? And then what if you could have actual, like, an exchange of some sort? How cool. That allows the world to be, like, every aspect of it to be even more alive in a way that is delightful, you know?
Yes, yes. Oh man. Yeah, because yeah, I mean, because there's a particular palm tree next to my house that when I come back from my my usual morning walk on the beach and swim and everything, that I just kind of hang out with a little bit. And again, there's no harm in it. And it's, we're not used to like having friends that are trees, but it's like, why not? Right? You know? And
Totally.
also before I step into the ocean, you know, I'm always asking my body to be aware of what creatures are there. Because sometimes there's sharks around and there's stingrays and any number of things where I am on the Atlantic. But I love swimming in the ocean, so I just asked myself to be aware. And then sometimes my head will go back and forth with like, is there something close by, or am I feeling somebody else's fear? Like that kind of thing. But that idea of just saying hello, like I do already ask my body to be aware, but then I don't actually ask creatures to say hello. So that's a great idea in terms of like, hey, if there's other creatures in here with me, can you say hello and let me know you're here? Because there's this one guy, he does it from above with a drone, but he often shows how closely sharks are swimming near people and they don't even know. And it's just like, because sharks aren't generally going to hurt you, right? They're not out to hurt you generally, but it might be nice to know if they're close by, right?
Totally.
So that whole idea of just being like, if you're close by, can you say hello? Whether you're a dolphin or a shark or a turtle or a stingray or whatever, jellyfish. So that's a great idea. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then what a what a cool acknowledgement it is to, like, when anyone, anything turns its attention toward you, it creates something. Sometimes people will turn their attention toward you and they've got a lot of judgments and they might not say anything with words, but you hear it, and that creates something. Or sometimes something will turn to you with so much adoration and caring, and that creates something. And then it's like you get to turn your attention toward every aspect of the world and create something with it, just with your attention, and like, how is it that you would like to be greeting the world? With plants, I find that if you turn your attention toward a plant and you just admire it, like, I have seen plants that were drooping over just start to stand up without even being watered. Or, I had a friend once who, I walked by her, she was visiting me, and she was just like staring at this orchid of mine. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm asking it if it would please bloom before I leave." And the timeline for the little buds that were there. It didn't make any sense for those flowers to open up before she left. She was going to leave in like a day or so. And it totally opened up. And then those blossoms stayed longer than any other orchid blossoms that I'd had. And it
Wow.
was just like, wow, you mean you can just ask the plants to flower? Like, who knew, you know? But just
That's great.
turning and saying hello is like creative. And that was just super exciting.
Well, and like it's almost like a specific request for like, can you contribute this to me, please? And the plant's like, okay, that sure, why not? I mean,
Right.
not like a plant can always do that, but when it can, it's probably like, sure, that's easy enough. Why
Right.
not? We
Right.
can
Well,
open up early.
it didn't make any sort of sense, but it responded. And how cool is that? And it was stronger than it had been before, truly. Like I saw it became greener, it had stronger roots. It was like, whoa, fertilizer. My friend, it was like my friend gave it fertilizer just by engaging with it. And so that's the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, maybe somebody would say that this is not quantifiable, or, you can't replicate this. It's not scientific or something like that. But who cares? Like if there's a 1 in a billion chance, why not? It's not going to, dampen your life. It's not going to get
Right.
away. If you like happen to walk by an orchid and just go like, "Hey, you're so beautiful. Would you like what can you show me?" I mean, it's just not going to create any sort of problem to ask that.
Yeah, after reading the study years ago where they had hooked plants up to some kind of energy meter, and they showed that once a plant saw a person cut it, then when it would go towards another plant with scissors, that the plant would react. And I'm just like, wow, and it's, of course, that makes total sense, right? But that's just not necessarily what we learned while we were growing up, right? And it gave me a whole new realization of like everything is energy. And when you're like interacting with something, like you said, and you're being a certain energy, like, hey, I'm going to come over and cut you. Um, like if you can be it, like in the situation you talked about with the ivy, if you can be conscious of it and say, hey, I need to be cutting here, like, how can I do this in the way that's going to create greater, that at least the plants are like, well, thanks for talking to us about it before you, because again, I've heard in plant classes where they talk about everybody, people talk about hugging trees, but it's actually a good idea to check in with the tree first before you hug it. And some people might think that's ridiculous, but I'm like, well, that makes sense, not, just be like, are you okay with, it's like with a dog before I go up to a dog, because, I've been bitten in the face by a dog. So which it not that it matters the bite or not, but I've just learned that, you want to tune into a dog and its owner before you say, hey, is it okay if I interact? So it's the kind of the same thing with plants too, but I just hadn't thought of it that way.
Totally.
Yeah. So that idea that yeah, you talked a little bit about communicating with bodies too, but that, yeah, I mean, I guess the main thing I'm thinking, like, if you could communicate, like if you were talking to a young child and you wanted to give them the permission to be aware and communicate this way, is there something you would want to share with them in terms of like, trusting their awareness? You know how, like, I know for myself that kids will shut down their awareness because somebody's communicating one thing energetically, but their words are different. So then they start not trusting themselves, or, this reality will tell them that their awareness is not valid, or any number of things. So is there something you would want, whether it's a young kid or a teenager or whatever, you want them to be aware of in regards to what's most empowering for them that way?
I mean, it is a lot of what we've been talking about so far, of just kind of saying, hey, what, like, did you say hello to that? You know? and inviting them to begin the conversation and then asking, oh, what was that like? Or what did you notice? And so it's really the questions are going to be a contribution to whoever you're asking the question of to get their own information rather than saying, you should do this, you should do that, but
Yeah.
to say, to introduce that in a conversation of like, hey, come here, would you say hello to this with me? And then just see what that creates, like what did you notice? And because I just love to experiment with everything. And each thing that I'm experimenting with or just playing with really is allowing me to grow, so it is that sense of play that has no particular agenda that allows you to follow what's fun for as long as it's fun and not needing it to be like a regimented thing that you're supposed to do. So, I guess it would really depend on the kid or the teenager, or the adult or what whoever
Yeah.
to really kind of invite them to go ahead and try it out, see what it's like. And it's weird because it is one of those things where it's sometimes it can be hard to uh quantify. It can be hard to track, like if you start saying hello to your house, you might not remember what it was like before when you weren't saying hello to your house. So sometimes it's not like I said hello to my house and all the windows flew up, and so sometimes it's quite subtle, but like uh what if you could just let yourself play with it and notice, if not what it is that it creates and whatever you're saying hello to, what is it that it creates in you? You know, do you have a sense of being more aware? Like with plants, one thing is that I just like plants. I just find them to be so beautiful and so like magical. It's just the way that they are all contributing to one another, and like they'll grow differently because of an insect and a moss, and there's just this like interplay of so many different species that just blows my mind. And so if I look at a plant, I'm kind of like, wow, this thing, and so for me, my curiosity, my interest already is moving in that direction. And the more that I engage with the conversation, the more I give myself permission to be present. And it's, again, somebody might be like, well, that's not true, or whatever it is that people want to say. But at the end of the day, I hung out with the plant and I was made happier by it, So it's kind of like, if that is if that is the consequence of me talking to the world, well, how cool is that? There are so many things that we can be engaging with that can be quite depressing and upsetting, I could
Yes.
go and like watch the news, and sometimes I do. And also I can just go outside and look at a plant and just be like, wow, what's that like? And even if it's me just chattering away to myself, quote unquote, my life is made richer. And really, how does it get better than that?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. There's a school here in Florida. I've spent 2 days there. It's called Flatwood Forest School, and it is right up against the woods, right? And it's mostly kids aged like 3 to 10, let's say. And they have a like very little bit of curriculum where they might talk about clouds or talk about something, but for the most part, they get to play, and part of that play also is out in the woods and next to the pond, right? So the first time I was there, they were going into the pond, the kids that wanted to, with nets to see if they could catch some fish and then release them. But they know that there could be alligators in the pond, so they communicate ahead of time, hey, we're going to be loud and tell the alligators to stay away. And they only go so far into the pond. They only go up to their knees because they just want to be aware of the alligators, right? And the kids also are aware of what to do if they get a tick on them, or if they get, they're just aware of their environment and what to do. And when they go out to the woods, like last time I was there, they went out to the woods, and then there's usually like three adults with this a group of kids, and we just spread out, and the kids get to do any kind of imaginative play they like, and they can climb trees, they can make, so I saw these girls, well, a combination of kids. There's like a little platform out there, and they went into like going, "Oh, we have a shop. Can I make you a smoothie?" And she hands me a pine cone that's a smoothie, and all those kinds of things that aren't necessarily part of a traditional school. That I'm like, this is so cool because it kind of naturally leads into what you're talking about, where you can step into an environment, be aware of what's around you that might harm you, um, communicate with it, and then not be like so many, it seems like so many parents are afraid to have their kids in nature, you know what I mean? Or you have to slap on a bunch of sunscreen and you have to do this and this to be. And so it's just been really wonderful watching kids in that kind of environment. And that's what I'd love to create more of in the world for kids, is to have a lot of their time be engaging with nature, because it's such a nurturing thing usually, you know.
Really.
Was your school experience mostly enjoyable, or
Well, I went to 9 elementary schools and
okay.
one middle school and 3 high schools and multiple universities. So I was constantly moving. And, you know, it was great because it actually ended up to where I kind of had to teach myself a lot of different things, because like at one school they were going to learn, say, multiplication the next term, and then the next school it was the next term, and then the next
Yeah.
school they'd already learned it. So it was like that kind of happened for a few of the different years of my learning. And so then I got to come up with my own way to learn what was required, which was just wonderful. It really allowed me to tailor my own learning to me. And then because I was like always the new kid, I was like this exciting new kid, and I didn't have to deal with the drama just yet, And then I'd move on before the drama started. So I had a very different type of schooling, but I started actually with a Montessori like preschool, and I just loved it. I remember just being like, whoa, we're getting to learn things. And there was so much of a sense of like it being kind of self-directed. With what it is that we would explore, which is just so great that you ask that, because it is kind of exactly what I've been talking about in all throughout this, of like the adventure of discovery, and how as you're engaging with anything, you get to be adding to your discovery just by like, oh, what if I do this? What if I do that? What if, and then not having to get it right, especially things that other people don't even think are possible, you just go,
Yes, yes.
okay, now what, So yeah, I guess that really did kind of set the stage for me enjoying discovery, you know?
Well, I'm kind of curious, when you're looking at engaging, whether you're engaging with your body, like an animal or a plant, is it all very similar to you, or do you feel like you have to shift a little bit to, like, for instance, talking to your horse versus talking to a plant?
Yeah, it is quite different, honestly. Um, a lot of the animals that I talk to are people's pets. Although, sometimes I'll talk to a squirrel or a bird or something like that. But so when talking to people's pets, I find that they really have kind of the energy of their person. And so sometimes you can like that's so loud that it's a little bit harder to hear the animal. Um, and to a certain extent, that is the case with plants too. Like I can go into somebody's house and look at their plants and be like, oh, your person's sad right now, you know, or
Oh,
oh, and then so I'll get a sense of kind of what's going on with the plants people. But um it's a little bit different. So it's kind of like I would say sometimes the bigger variable is uh, people related, strangely, you know. But yeah, you know, it's like when I am engaging with my body or a plant or an animal, I would say that the first thing is to really kind of like almost like push away all of the points of view. Like those can be so loud that you're not even hearing what it is that you're trying to talk to. So, you know, with my body, definitely if something is going on with my body, I have to first be like, okay, everywhere that I've decided what this is, or that this is even my stuff rather than somebody's bad breath I'm smelling, or, you know, like I just have to, it takes that kind of presence to be like, all right, no, not all of the conclusions about this. What is my body saying? Or with the plant. So that kind of action is a kind of goes across the board and is something that I just really recognize is very useful, regardless of who I'm talking to or what I'm talking to like let go of all of the everybody else's chatter as much as
yes.
possible, you know, and
Yeah.
then kind of be like, okay, no, what are you saying? And what are you saying? And sometimes it's like, please help me, I'm being a little stupid, you know, like if you could please show me in any way that I can get it, you know, I would be grateful, you know, and so just that willingness to notice the difference between when something is coming from my head versus when I'm actually like I don't know why this image is coming up when I'm like actually listening or when I'm being a ventriloquist, you know, when I'm like the plant says blah 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 versus like actually relaxing and being like, no, what do you have to say? And I would say that the big kind of trick to that is to keep on letting go of what you think it's supposed to be, you know? It's like it takes a certain
Yes.
kind of relaxation to listen. Like sometimes
Yes.
when you're talking to somebody and they're like filling in your sentences before you've even finished them, you know?
Yeah.
We can do that
Yeah.
really.
No, I do that to myself and others. And I even notice that with my body, if I'm asking a question, I don't usually get words back. I usually get like a visual or some kind of kinesthetic feel. Like, so for instance, because I've been moving a lot of boxes and a lot of heavy boxes and doing a lot of heavy lifting or whatever, my back is sore. So it's easy to be like, well, this happened, therefore my back is sore. Instead of like, my back is sore. Is this even mine? And one. And then two, okay, body, instead of like filling in the blank, like I need to stretch, I need to this or that. And again, like you said, really listening. When I checked in, my body was giving me the sense of doing more like dancing and flowing type movements, you know? And so it's just like being willing to just sense that, even though it's not like in words, right? And be like, okay, I'll try that, you know? I might be making it up, but like you said, it's like, it doesn't hurt me to do dancing and flowing movements with my body at all. It's fun to do. I like to do it anyway. So, hey, let's do that. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share today that we haven't really talked about?
I mean, the one thing that comes up is that when I when I ask like plants or trees or the earth, whatever it might like to tell people, one big aspect that I think can be surprising to people is that actually this world would like to nurture you. It would like to nurture you, your body. It would like to nurture you energetically. And so a big part of opening up to this conversation is actually being willing to be nurtured, which is, it's funny that that would be a challenge, because if you just look at it on one hand, it's like, oh, that sounds great. But it can be very different than what people have been experiencing or different than what they expect. So really just kind of introducing this idea of like, what if the world around you actually like cared about you and would like to reach into your world and contribute to it. You are a part of the world. And so as you are made greater, everything gets to be greater. And that gets to be a contribution to everything. So, like, what if you were to allow yourself to be nurtured by a tree or a plant or a pet or your body, and that is one aspect of things that, our many different cultures kind of sweep under the rug in a certain way. So I like to bring it back out and be like, what choices can you make to go ahead and allow yourself to be so nurtured?
No, that's sweet. Yeah, I mean, and part of that it seems like is being aware as well, because I love being in the ocean in the waves, and I feel that's really nurturing. But that also requires me to be aware, because there's some days when I go down to the ocean where I'm really checking it out and going like, is it going to be a nurturing day or is this a better day to stay out, Because if it's really tumbling and processing and doing whatever it's doing, then it's just that allowance of like, well, today might not be a day where going in the water is the most nurturing thing. It might be better to walk on the beach.
Totally.
Or like when I see, like I've seen really big rattlesnakes here, like stretched out sunning, you know, and there's so many projections that will be on rattlesnakes instead of like, oh, aren't you beautiful? Like giving it its space, right? And being aware of that if it needs to, it will bite you, but but or if it's coiled, you don't want to get close. But if it's stretched out and it's sunning, you can just be there, like be like, wow, that snake's so beautiful. And it's like instead of the other projections that are often on snakes like that, right? So that returning of the nurturing, I guess, is partially in the awareness, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad that you're willing to come on because, yeah, this there's there's so much about this that I love to share in the world. So thanks for being a great mouthpiece for that. And I will also put whatever links you want for people to connect with you below the podcast so people can check in and see what else you're doing.
Perfect.
So thanks for being on Growing Up Conscious today. And that's it for today's recording.
Yay, thank you.